t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, my love, our weekly talk show from the heart of Europe, today from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Here we discuss what moves Europe for better or for worse. I'm Stefan Grobe, great to have you with us. Coming up this week, shock and embarrassment in Berlin. Friedrich Merz was only elected as the new German chancellor by the Bundestag in the second round of voting. This never happened before in the history of the Federal Republic. Is he already damaged goods before he can bring the show on the road? Or can his coalition still work together in a spirit of trust? And what about his ambitious plans for Europe? And in Romania, an ultra-nationalist populist secured a first-round victory in the country's presidential election. He will now head to a runoff on May 18th against an independent centrist, dealing a blow to Romania's ruling establishment. There's much at stake now. Will Romanians maintain the country's pro-European course, or will anti-EU forces prevail? Questions for our guests today, all members of the European Parliament, namely Damian Böselager from the German Volt Party, sitting with the Greens, Anna Stürk from Renew Europe, and Siegfried Murejan from the European People's Party. Thanks again for coming on the show. It's great to have you here. Now, before we get the conversation going, let's take a closer look at what happened in Berlin this week.
Friedrich Merz has reached his long-desired political destination. After decades on and off politics, the 69-year-old has finally become the 10th Chancellor of the Federal Republic. In the 3 months after snap elections that turned his Christian Democrats into the biggest force in the Bundestag, Merz has already come under sustained attacks from fellow conservatives and their media allies for giving too much away to the Social Democrats, his coalition partner. And that was before he even moved into the chancellery. Now Merz has to deliver. There are huge expectations in Berlin and Brussels that Merz revives the economy, brings Europe back on track, repairs the sputtering French-German engine, reins in Trump, and tames migration. Can he do all that? Where are potential pitfalls?
All right, so that was quite a shocker this week. Damien, I want to start with you. Merz's defeat in the first round. Was that really a total surprise, or was there some writing on the wall? What do you think?
You see, Merz had a rocky start, even though the start was already 20 years ago, so it has been maybe a rocky ride for decades now. I think it was a bit of a superfluous thing that happened, maybe even irresponsible by some of the members of parliament of the Bundestag to not vote him in directly. At the moment, I think it's very clear that in Germany and Germany for Europe as well, we need a stable government. So I would have wished for less of a rocky start and more stability now in this time. Merz already did a lot of very, let's say, surprising moves for his voters, at least right after the elections. And I think what we all need in Germany and in Europe is a stable German government.
Anna, you're from Austria, which also has some history of complicated coalitions here. How do you explain this lack of support? I mean, there were 18 votes. 18! I mean, there's always 1 or 2 dissenters, right? But 18 is enormous. What do you make of this?
Well, honestly, when I first heard it, I was just plainly frustrated. And I think this is also how a lot of voters feel, because what we expect is for politicians to rise up and to take the responsibility that they were given from the voters. And clearly, at least 18 members of the Bundestag did not have that responsibility. And I'm sorry, but this is not the time for party plays or power moves. I agree with you. This is a time for not just stability, but it's a time to come together and actually work on solutions and bring solutions to the huge tasks ahead of us that we just talked about in this little clip. So I really cannot understand how politicians do this. And maybe if I may, you know, if we already see a rise in far-right politics. We already see a rise in populism. And honestly, if we continue like this, if Democrats are kind of self-dismantling themselves, then we don't even have to wait for them to become stronger. We're doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think we cannot let that happen.
And Siegfried, if you were a German member of the Bundestag, Christian Democrat, obviously, would you have voted for Friedrich Merz?
Absolutely. And had I been a social democrat, I would have voted for him as well, because, as you've also said, you know, this was the end of a process in which Friedrich Merz ran an electoral campaign which he won. His party came in first. Then he negotiated a coalition agreement of the two major parties in the country in a relatively good period of time. That coalition agreement was approved by his party and was approved in a referendum of the members.
He has been criticized by conservatives within his own ranks, right, for giving away too much to the Social Democrats. Was that justified?
Well, if the two major parties that had been competing for decades are now forming a coalition, it's obvious that this is a compromise. Nobody can be 100% happy with the outcome, but this, I believe, is, you know, the best possible government that Germany can have. I think for all of us in Europe, the largest member state of the Union, having a government is good news. The politicians are normally criticized for doing too little. Now, even before he took office, he took some bold initiatives, some bold measures on investment, on security, on defense. Normally we're unhappy because politicians do too little. Now there comes somebody who, you know, does things, and all of a sudden we think it's too much too soon. Yeah. I think we should observe, but all in all, I think it's good news that EU's largest member state has a stable government now.
Maybe can I come in on this 1 second? I think nobody, actually, most of the opposition parties seem to be quite happy that he made the move towards more investment. I think the problem was what he did before in the campaign, where he said, I would never go away from the debt rules. And I think that really made some conservatives unhappy, because he really clearly said, I'm not going to break the debt rules. And then now he completely changed
then he did it with the help of the Greens, so they should have voted for him too, maybe.
It's just, I think for me personally, I would have just wished for more honesty during the electoral campaign, because he would have won anyways, and then he would have less of a backlash now. But in the end, I think it's true. Like, it's not about, I mean, I didn't vote for the CDU in the federal elections. I voted for my own party. But still, at this juncture of where we are right now, I think it's clear that if you're part of a coalition government, you do compromises and you support. Yeah. And it's not so much about, you know, whether Saskia Esken was treated fairly, or whether I'm
the co-chairwoman of the Social Democrats.
Exactly. Or if there was too much SPD in the coalition program. It's done now. Now we need to move ahead.
So there are huge expectations of the new government in Germany and in the EU, and some experts in Brussels who I've spoken to said they have never seen anything like that. What do people in Germany expect from the new Merz government? Those who voted for him and those who didn't. We've asked people in the streets of Berlin. Take a listen.
Yes, of course we hope that the new federal government will take care of the problems that we are facing, and that is quite a lot. We need to consolidate our finances, we need to give the economy a new push, and of course we have foreign policy problems. And whatever you have voted, you can only wish the new government the best of luck in tackling these issues well. Well, I'd like the government to simply do what it says, and that we realize that democracy works. Well, I'm finally happy that something different is happening, because the previous government wasn't that great before. And let's see what Merz brings. His promises, I'm just curious.
Yeah, let's see what Merz brings. We've just heard. It seems that he has an expectation bonus, Anna. How long will that last?
Well, I never know whether expectation is a bonus or really can harm, because if there's such a huge expectation, then you almost can only fall short of that. But again, I think what we need to see is politicians, and be that the German government, but that's true for everywhere, actually working, and we just heard it, right? What the people want is for politicians to act, to work on the huge challenges that are ahead of us, and to stop the infighting and the silly he said, she said. We need to come together, find compromises. I think this is something that this House knows very well how to do. Sometimes we're being criticized for it, but I think it's a virtue of this House. And I think, national governments, like in Germany, they maybe could learn a little bit about those compromises.
Yeah. And Siegfried, if there is any winner in this week's debacle, it may be the far-right AfD party. Is that true? And can the party capitalize on that?
I'm convinced that in the long term, the incident that happened this week, that by a very narrow margin, he failed to be elected in the first round, I'm convinced that that would not matter in the long term. People expect the German government to deliver. They expect the German government to reduce bureaucracy, cut red tape, manage migration crisis, transition successfully to a new economy, a digital economy, an economy which is energy efficient, which is competitive. There are so many challenges. We have autocrats around Europe trying to weaken us, trying to weaken all EU member states, interfering with elections, trying to weaken independent institutions. So the to-do list for him is so long. I'm sure he will be himself very soon forgetting
so no
about the fact.
for the far right.
Look, I think that won't matter in the long term. It was an event. It happened for the first time. That's why we are still discussing about it 3 days after it happened. But 3 weeks after it happened, really, it would not have mattered anymore.
The far-right party was, part of a big shocker the week before when the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution formally labeled the party extremist. In a 1,000-page report that revived talk of a possible ban of the party. Should the government and should the Bundestag pursue this?
So first of all, I think for the people here in the European Parliament to find out that the AfD is extremist is actually, not so surprising. The comments that we hear from the colleagues that even the, let's say, normal far right within this House finds appalling, made them, be really sitting alone and completely isolated. So if you want to put it mildly, the German extremists or fascists are always worse than those of other countries. That's something we also learn from history. So I think it's like the label is a legal label, and it has been applied by the Constitutional Service, as you said, and I think it's probably valuable. And so what should we do now? I think the first thing is we need to look at what we do with police officers and army officers that are potentially AfD members. What does it mean? So everyone who holds such a status, we need to definitely look at the party finances and the potential ban there, because we should not be supporting with taxpayers, with public money, people that are extremists and are trying to undermine our democratic order. And then, yes, we should also look at the ban. I think what's important to understand is, and this label has lost some of its power, extremist means that they are not willing to work with other parties to build a democratic kind of situation, but that they want to turn our democracy upside down. And as soon as they would have the power, would actually do it, and are trying that already. So this is a threat to our democracy, and I think it's important that we deal with it with all the measures that we have.
Yeah. Anna, roughly 50% of Germans in latest pollings would support an AfD ban. What's your opinion? I mean, you're in Austria, you have a similar situation here. Would it be politically wise to do it? I mean, some in the new majority seem to be skeptical about this.
I mean, I think it's always easy to be sitting here comfortably in another country or from another country and
I hope you're sitting comfortably.
Judging other countries' decisions or other countries' political situation. I think so. I'm being very careful with that. I think Damien has put it quite perfectly. I mean, the stuff we hear here from the colleagues, I mean, it's not that different from what I hear from my FPÖ colleagues in there. So, unfortunately, they are very much in line. But, I think at the moment, I'm very happy what we saw happen in Austria, which was, they were given the chance to form a government. They were given a chance to find a majority. But like you said, they don't actually have the interest in doing that. So they failed. They could have delivered to their voters, but they didn't want to. They failed. They'd rather continue their pro-Russian, anti-EU propaganda than actually take on responsibility. And I think this is something we have to remember, that usually the extremists, the far-right extremists, they have no interest in actually governing, in actually taking on responsibility. And this is something we can never forget.
Siegfried, there's always the danger that if you ban an extremist party, the voters are still there, right? What would they do? And then will there be a new political formation, etc.? So you don't get rid of the problem. The problem in Germany is that 1/4 of the population are willing to support a an extremist organization.
You can ban a party, but you cannot ban the voters, right? So basically, I also believe that the extremists do not have solutions to the challenges that we're facing. They cannot implement what they promise during the campaigns. What they promise is very often populistic, sounds nice, silver bullet, but doesn't work in practice. Wherever they had a chance to govern and to influence the development of their countries, what was left was a mess. Look at Greece, extreme left, former Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. Greece was on the verge of leaving the euro area. Look in the United Kingdom, Brexit. Look in other countries as well. So they are dangerous. They have no solutions to the challenges that we're facing. This is why I say pro-Europeans have to work together. Extremists have to be marginalized. And we have to explain to the people that extremists are just playing with the people's fear in their own self-interests to make themselves as politicians big, but they are not really interested in solving the problems and serving the people.
All right. So we talked a lot about politics. Let's bring in policy for a moment. Damien, Merz has announced already, way before he became chancellor, that he wants to play a more assertive role in Europe. Is that good news or bad news for the rest of Europe?
I was very hopeful when he said that he wants to be a Europe chancellor. But then, like a second later, he voted with the AfD, the far right, basically on potentially closing Germany's borders. And there was a bit of a setback, I have to say, in that direction. Also, when you look at the electoral program, the coalition agreement, where do you find Europe? Actually at the bottom of everything. So first everything else comes, and then at the end you find a small chapter about Europe that could have also been written 10 years ago. So to be honest, so far I still have to see his great engagement for Europe, but I really, really, really hope that he will become more active and that he will also not just accept the status quo of the European Union, but think about how it should be to be able to deal with our challenges, be it defense, be it climate change, be it the economy and competitiveness. I think there is not only little laws that we have to change, but the actual procedures of how we take decisions in Europe. And so my hope for him is that he does it. And I think actually he will not be successful on a national level if he doesn't fix the things that we need to fix together on the European level.
Okay. And before I come to you, I want to bring in Guntram Wolf, an expert at the Brussels think tank Bruegel. We asked him about one issue that should be a priority for Merz in Europe. And this is what he told us. Take a listen.
I think three things are central. First, Germany needs to really stand behind the European Union and make clear that it is the European Union that negotiates trade agreements, not Germany, not any individual country. Second, Germany has to push Europe to agree on more trade agreements and to sign more trade agreements with third countries, Mercosur, the Asian economies, other growing economies. And last but not least, Germany should support through the European Union again the multilateral trading system.
All right, Anna, your comments.
I can only agree with what's been said, and this is I think why are we even discussing this? Why am I as an Austrian or you as a Romanian talking about this passionately as well? Because obviously what happens in Germany matters for all of Europe, and whether we have a German leader who rises up to the challenge and who stands there together with someone like Macron, who has risen to the challenge in the last few months, who has become a strong European leader, and having two of them really standing there and supporting us as the European Union, particularly when it comes to the question of trade. I think this is the matter of these days, and I think we can only hope that Merz can rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Siegfried, we've heard a lot about Macron and Merz being big buddies, right? I don't know whether this is true, but apparently compared to the former couple, there's much more to see here. Wolf mentioned Mercosur. Now, Germany wants it ratified, France not so much. How is Merz going to convince Macron that France is not only a country made up of farmers, but also a G7 industrial nation?
Look, if the new US president intends to isolate his country and his economy from the rest of the world, let him do it. We think it's a bad thing for the US. We think it would lead to more inflation, more poverty, less jobs for the people in the US, less opportunities, less growth for American companies. But you know, that's not so much our cup of tea. What we're interested in is supporting European companies, and we know that trade is good. We know that isolation leads to poverty, and trade leads to growth, leads to job creation. It led to the development that we saw in the past decades. This is why, as many other countries and regions of the world want to trade with us, we should do this. We need to conclude more trade agreements with other regions of the world and export more to those countries that are interested in our imports. That also leads to job creation here in Europe. Now on Mercosur, on the trade agreement with Latin America, there are some sectors of our economy that are still concerned. Primarily agriculture. Many parts of the economy would benefit a lot from that trade agreement. Some parts are still concerned. The right conclusion is not to stop the whole thing. The right conclusion is to support those who would be negatively impacted. So Friedrich Merz will have to find, together with us here in the European Parliament, together with the European Commission, tools to take away the fears of the farmers, so that politicians in all member states can say, look, with this specific support for farmers, we can in good faith support that trade agreement.
Short question, short answer. The Mercosur agreement has been signed. It now has to be ratified. So it's on the table, and it's you take it or you leave it. What should we do?
We take it. You want a short answer? We take it. I mean, Siegfried and Anna have said it. Look, the world is big, but it's not endless. And we have North America, we have South America, we have the African continent, we have Asia, and we somehow need to diversify. So I think Mercosur is really, really important, and we need to move ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for this topic. Thanks to our panel for their insights. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, pro-Europe or anti-Europe? What will voters in Romania finally decide? Stay with us. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. Our guests are still Anna Stürk, Siegfried Mureșan, and Damian Buzelaga. The far-right Eurosceptic Jorge Simeon has won the first round of the Romanian presidential election rerun. You will remember that last year's election was annulled by the Supreme Court of Romania due to attempted Russian manipulation. A decision that was sharply criticized by the global far-right, including the Trump administration. A victory for Simeon could have a serious impact on Europe, say political observers. One of these observers is Claudiu Popa from Euronews Romania. He sums up for us again what this ballot is all about.
Romania is heading into a tense and defining second round of presidential elections, with voters facing a stark choice between two radically different candidates, George Simeon and Nicu Șordan. Simeon, the leader of the Nationalist Alliance for Romanian Unity Party, has increasingly aligned his rhetoric and position with those sympathetic to the Kremlin interest. In a recent and widely criticized statement, Simeon claimed that Russia poses no threat to NATO. His opponent is Nicu Șordan, an independent candidate with a background in mathematics and a strong pro-European progressive orientation. He successfully ran as an independent for the mayorship of Bucharest. Voters, therefore, must decide between two fundamentally different futures.
So, Siegfried, these very pessimistic predictions about a potential victory of Simeon, are they accurate or scaremongering?
Look, Mr. Simeon, the candidate who won the first round of Romania's presidential election, is a populist. He's a radical candidate, he's an extremist, and he's an anti-European candidate. He's not a conservative politician that one can do business in a pro-European spirit. Afterwards, he would be a problem maker. For Romania, the president of the country sits in the European Council. As of day one, Viktor Orban would have an additional ally. That would be bad news for Europe. bad news for Ukraine. Romania has been a keen supporter of Ukraine, and also due to its geographical position, it is essential for providing support to Ukraine. So it's essential not only to continue the development of Romania, but also to preserve the unity within the European Union, that the pro-European candidate is winning and that the extremists be defeated.
And a Simeon victory would definitely expand the group of Eurosceptic prime ministers, Viktor Orban, Fico, Robert Fico, etc. But let me ask in a brutally honest fashion, do Hungary, Slovakia and Romania carry that much weight in the EU that this matters?
Well, of course, every single country matters in the EU. And as you just said, I mean, this has repercussions even beyond the European Union, because this is a question of, do we support Ukraine? This is a question of, are we strict with Russia? Do we sanction Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine? But let's look a little bit beyond, or maybe even closer at Simeon and what he stands for and who he is. This is a person, a potential European leader who openly has called for a greater Romania, who has openly called for annexing parts of other countries, openly called against the international law. We cannot accept having a European Union leader openly being ready to defy the entire international order and potentially wanting to annex other countries.
Well,
we have to be very clear what we're dealing with here.
He himself, Damien, said that he doesn't want to be a disruptor, but a reformer.
Oh, yes.
So kind of more Meloni rather than Orban. What do you think? Is that?
Look, it's difficult for me to assess his exact impact now versus his past statements. I think what Anna and Siegfried have said very clearly is that we have the risk of disintegrating forces in Europe to become stronger and stronger, and to have already 3, maybe 4, you can argue, people in the European Council that really do not believe in the current European Union with democracy, freedom of the media, free judges. I mean, this is really a dangerous precedent, and it allows Putin to have more and more influence. And I think what it also shows is that we have been naive, quite naive about how social media functions in general, but also how it is manipulated. And I think there is something for us here also in Europe and in Brussels and Strasbourg to do, to really wake up and see, are our current rules good enough to fight off the polarization, the extremist influence that are really taking over more parts of our societies as we speak?
Siegfried, we know that he's anti-European, you described it. He's also against aid for Ukraine. Is this enough to carry him to victory? Is there a majority of Romanians who want an anti-European candidate prime minister?
By the way, he is banned from entering Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, 2 of Romania's neighboring countries, for having met Russian agents on Ukrainian territory in the past. So he's someone who directly and indirectly would support the interests of autocrats of the Russian Federation against our interests, firstly. Secondly, the Romanian people have been very pro-European. As of according to the last Eurobarometer, 78% of the people of Romania believe that EU membership is a good thing. So Simeon is an anti-European candidate, but he's also an anti-establishment candidate. We had a grand coalition of the 2 largest parties governing Romania for the past 4 years, throughout several crises: war in Ukraine, high energy prices, high inflation, not always reforming the country, managing it, but not always reforming it, really bringing it forward. So this is also a bit of a protest vote against the established parties. He is anti-European, but not all of his voters are anti-European. And this is why we need to explain to the people why he would be a president isolating the country, endangering the economic development of the country, and not really fulfilling their expectation. Because some of the people say, look, we are pro-European, but we're disappointed by established parties. We want something new. He would not bring us forward, as people hope. He would bring us backwards, and Romania would lose much of what it has achieved over the past 35 years.
Nico Șordan, who is also not establishment, right? The mayor of Bucharest, an independent. How should he finish the remaining days of the campaign? I mean, stressing this, what you just said, the pro-European accomplishments?
Absolutely. I think he should tell to the people of Romania that, look, George Simeon wouldn't be an experiment that we can, rewind or change or take back 2-3 months later. George Simeon would affect the rule of law, would weaken independent institutions as of day one, and it would be a long-term choice for the country. He needs to set the bar very high, explain to the people what the dangers are.
Great. Thank you so much. As always, check out the latest on the presidential election in Romania in our programs on our various platforms. For now, many thanks to our guests and to our viewers. Join us again on Euronews. Welcome to Brussels, my love. I'm Stefan Grob, and I'm here with my guests Siegfried Morijan from the EPP, Anna Stürk from Renew, and Damian Böselager from the Greens, all members of the European Parliament. Suddenly, everything went dark. Last week, Spain, Portugal, and parts of France experienced a massive power outage. Traffic lights failed, elevators stopped, electronic payments broke down, and across cities, people stepped in to help one another. The blackout was likely triggered by technical issues, although the exact cause remains unclear. Anna, when you first heard about it, what was your thinking?
Well, first of all, I've been working on electricity grids for the last few months. We're working on a position from the European Parliament. So for me, in a way, it felt very close to home. And very close to what I've been working on and what we were fearing could happen. Of course, as you said, we still don't know exactly what happened, and I don't think this is the room for us to speculate about this. But what we know, and what certainly didn't help the situation, is that we currently have electricity grids throughout Europe that aren't meeting the challenges that our energy transition is posing to those grids. Because unfortunately, we haven't been spending enough money on them. We haven't been giving them enough attention over the last few years. So really, I think this is a wake-up call to us to see that if we want a successful energy transition, then we cannot only focus on the generation side of it, but we actually also have to focus on the question of storage and energy storage, and especially the question of electricity grids. But also, if I can say, there is a positive, there is a silver lining in this story, and that is that actually we have seen now that the interconnection between European countries supports our countries, meaning that the fact that relatively quickly Spain and Portugal could come back onto the grid was helped by France. This could not have been possible if we didn't have interconnectors. So really, this is an advertisement for the European Energy Union. I
think we tended to file blackouts in the miscellaneous category. I remember really when I was a kid, in 1977, there was a blackout in New York. And people were kind of smiling when 9 months later there were more babies being born than usual. But today, everybody knows that this is dead serious, right? Can we be kind of relieved that probably it wasn't a cyber attack and it wasn't a terrorist attack, et cetera, so it was really a technical issue? Is that already some good news here? Damian.
So first of all, I think it's an interesting idea to combine the electricity portfolio with a demography portfolio and maybe find solutions there for more babies. But in general, look, I think there's a couple of learnings from it. The first one, as Anna said, is that energy grid stability is a super important issue that might need more attention. I think also when it comes to the interconnectedness, there's positive examples, but it's also true that without Morocco's input, there wouldn't have been a stabilization, and maybe further integration of the European grid can be helpful. I think it's also clear that we need maybe 2, maybe 3 times the current grid capacity if we want to electrify all the things that we need to electrify to become climate neutral, which is our goal. Even though people seem to question this is still our goal. So energy is a critical infrastructure. There is clearly a risk that we can now see more clearly, and I think it's important that we also look at it from a hacking perspective, that we look at it from a security perspective, that these things can't happen anymore.
Right. Well, the concern, of course, is that such a blackout could happen again. It is a real risk. And how can we protect ourselves? We spoke about this with Alberier Montgrenier, an expert at the European Energy Security Initiative. Here's what he told us.
These things can happen again, right, for a number of reasons. So this is not the first large power outage in the recent history of the developed world. The main lesson from this outage is you obviously need civilian preparedness on top of that, but we need to try and prevent these things from happening as much as possible. And in order to do this, we need to invest now in the grids, in our production system, in the supply chains that support this, and because the costs of inactions are very high, both for the economy, but also for society and security in general.
Siegfried, you mentioned civilian preparedness, and a few weeks ago we had this discussion here when the EU Commission suggested that each citizen should have a sort of survival kit at home for all kinds of crises, and many people took it lightly, let's put it this way. But now we see, this could be really serious.
This can happen. I happened to be in Spain on the day of the blackout. So what did it feel there? It was during the afternoon. There was no communication, no internet, no Wi-Fi, no trains, no undergrounds, no card payments, all of the things that we take for granted that are part of our day-to-day life were already...
Where were you? What were you doing when the moment it happened?
I was supposed to go into a meeting where we were supposed to have translation from one language into another, and we were told there is no translation because there is no electricity. And had there not been daylight, the meeting would have been cancelled. So some hours during daylight, it worked. But if it takes some more hours into the night, there's risk of criminality and so on. So this is severe, and we have to be ready for this. We have to understand we're all together in this. We have to be ready to support each other in Europe. This is why connecting ourselves is so important. But for individual citizens, yes, a preparedness kit, because risks exist, dangers exist, autocrats around Europe might, feel encouraged to attack us in the one way or the other. On the day of the blackout, I was looking for a colleague who had the charger for my telephone, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to charge it. So be prepared and be able to take care of yourself for 2-3 days in case that you're disconnected from the rest of the world. Do have some cash, do have some water, do have some food. Make sure that you can stay in touch with the rest of the world for the case of any attack, any blackout, any natural catastrophe. This is a good idea.
Damien, there were many commentators pointed to the fact that one of the reasons could have been that Spain has a high percentage of renewable energy that could have caused the problem here. Is this credible?
And to be honest, I would have to look in detail into that. But I think what Anna also said already is if we have enough battery capacity, if we have ways to somehow get rid of the lows and the highs in the energy production of renewables, I think that shouldn't be the case. But I would, to be honest, in this specific case, I'm not informed enough to make a judgment.
All right. Clear answer and honest. On that point, we can close the conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. If you want to reach out, please send us an email at brusselsmylove@euronews.com, or you can catch us on social media. That's it for this edition. I'm Stefan Grobe. Have an excellent week. See you soon here on Euronews.